On 100.9 WXIR, this is Evidence of Design, and I'm your host, Jason Taylor. Good morning, everyone. You are listening to Evidence of Design here on 100.9 FM WXIR. My name is Jason Taylor, and I am your host, and I am happy to be joined today by my good friends and co-hosts today. We have Matt Treadwell.
Hello.
We also have a past guest coming back, Mr. Graham Hughes.
Hello.
It's your third time on the show.
Exciting.
That is right. And Graham, we are going to be talking today about participatory budgeting. That is a mouthful, but it is a really fun and exciting mouthful to get through, to talk about this new process being sort of developed and piloted, I think is the word, piloted in Rochester. Participatory budgeting, it's a democratic process through which we can all figure out together how to fight poverty and get proposals funded. Did I pass that test there, Graham?
Yeah, I'd say you did.
That was good enough.
Yeah, it was good enough. There's a lot more to it than that. But
absolutely.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that this hour. And we want to hear from you folks. We want to hear from you in this discussion. You can reach us in a number of ways. And one you probably know, give us a call. 585-219-8889. Again, 585-219-8889. Give us a call about participatory budgeting. Let us know if you've heard about it. And let us know if you have some proposals or some ideas that you think would help to fight poverty in Rochester. You can also tweet us at evidencedesign0, or give us an email throughout the show, evidenceofdesign101@gmail.com. So, let's talk about some participatory budgeting. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Matt, let's take it away. I've definitely heard that band before. Matt, who is that?
That was my band.
Awesome.
That was your band?
Yeah.
Wow.
We just played a release show last night for the album that song is off of.
That's awesome. You have to let me know the next time you guys are playing a show.
Well, it's funny you ask, Graham. It's next Friday at the Bug Jar. For listeners who enjoyed that, catch me there.
Next Friday at the Bug Jar.
Yep.
And what's the name of your band, Matt?
Sastrugi.
How do you?
Sastrugi. Nobody will remember that. I can't even remember that.
And what kind of music do you make?
I make music that's inspired by a lot of English bands that were active in the late 70s and early 80s in a style known as post-punk. But it's not really... It's informed by that, but I feel like it's different too.
Yeah, I'm obviously biased because you're a good friend of mine, Matt. But yeah, your music is pretty killer, and if you're into that stuff, that post-punk sound, then Sastrugi's definitely worth checking out. But folks, we are going to talk about participatory budgeting today, and Graham, I really want to thank you for being here on the show to have this conversation with folks in the community, because I'm not sure folks know that much about participatory budgeting. It sounds, again, kind of like a mouthful, but it's really important because the process has been going on, and right now folks can actually submit proposals that we can vote on to get funded to help to fight poverty. So would you mind, Graham, explaining what participatory budgeting is and doing a much better background than I did?
Sure can. So before I talk about participatory budgeting, I'll just say that I'm here on behalf of the organization that I work for, which is hosting participatory budgeting here in Rochester as a pilot. It's called the Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative, and that's why we have PB here.
Yes. So RMAPI, folks might have heard about. Yeah.
RMAPI for sure. So participatory budgeting, or PB for short, like you said, Jason, is a democratic process through which people decide how money gets spent. People brainstorm ideas for projects. Volunteers, known as budget delegates, turn those ideas, or as many of them as possible, into real projects with, budgets and vendors and sites and all that good stuff identified. And then the projects get shown throughout the community, and then they go up to be voted on openly by the community. And in the case of Rochester, anybody who lives in Monroe County and is over the age of 11 can vote on which projects to fund.
11.
11 years old.
It's
Wow.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a registered voter. You can be, a felon. All you have to be is 11 years old.
This is very exciting, like how just open it is for a wide variety of people.
Yeah. So here in Rochester, and this is typical of participatory budgeting processes throughout both our country and around the world, is overseen by a group of community members who in other processes are typically called a steering committee, but in our case they've elected to call themselves the community leadership team. And like I said, they're a group of community representatives who came together right at the beginning of this whole thing to make a series of decisions about how the process would work, and to provide oversight and advisement to staff who are facilitating the process, because that's really what I do. I facilitate this process as it goes on. And so the age, being 11 years old as the minimum age that you need to be, was a decision that they made, which is pretty cool.
And how much money do we have in this process, Graham?
So RMAPI has $175,000 set aside for this process to allocate. And of that pot of money, any individual project can propose for between $10,000 and $50,000 roughly. So we're not going to say no if somebody comes with an $8,000 proposal. But if you come and say, I want to fix my doorknob.
Doesn't fight poverty.
No, it doesn't fight poverty, and
Right.
It's not in that bracket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where did this money come from? Like, how did RMAPI secure $175,000 to have participatory budgeting be piloted in Rochester?
Yeah. So the money comes from our contract with the Empire State Poverty Reduction Initiative, or ESPRI. Lots of acronyms today. That's an initiative that Governor Cuomo started several years ago, and it funds some other activities that RMAPI is doing. In total, from the Empire State Poverty Reduction Initiative, we got, I want to say, about $2.5 million. That is probably not an exact number, but it's about that much. And the money goes to fund projects or pilot projects like PB. We also have a chunk of money going to YAMTEP, which is another acronym. I think it's Young Adult Manufacturing Training and something program. It's a job training program. There's about $800,000 going to YAMTEP, and then some other projects, and then a good amount of money for staffing. But that money it's doled out over about three years or so, and it's almost all of the funding that RMAPI has right now.
This is really exciting to me because I don't know much about budgeting processes. In fact, I just finished a short research paper on educational funding, and I came in with a question, but as what happens when I do research, I end up with way more questions after the research is over than I have answers. And I was just floored of the the complications within at least educational funding, but we're talking, governmental countywide funding, at least in this case. So why I'm so excited about this idea of participatory budgeting is, you mentioned various acronyms, Graham, and you mentioned sort of streams of funding, but this is an opportunity for all of us within Monroe County to directly create proposals, directly vote on proposals to make sure that we can decide how the funding works. Because a lot of times, I have no idea with the trillions of dollars that are in our economy, how that money's moved around with discretionary funding and non-discretionary funding and, different accounts and all that. So my point is funding is really complicated, and I appreciate this opportunity to have, you mentioned a community leadership team or backbone staff through our MAPI, people who can be the sort of stewards of this democratic budgeting process.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I agree with you. And one of the really cool things about PB in general, but specifically about our PB process here, is that it really doesn't require a lot of people. You don't need a 501c3 to get the funding. You don't need any sort of formal organization. If the community votes that your project should get the money, you just get it. And I think that's really, really cool because there are so many people out there who have so many great ideas for projects that could get funded that just haven't been able to in the past because they don't have a formal organization or they don't have the kinds of ties and relationships with major funders in the area. And I think that's really cool. And that's really the point of this, is to empower people who are historically underrepresented and disempowered in our community.
There's a real simplicity to it and ease of access that I think is just the most inspiring and encouraging thing about this.
Yeah, and it came from that idea of empowering communities and people and making this process really easy and accessible to them. It actually started in Brazil in 1989 in the city of Porto Alegre. And when they started it, it was a small political party, the Workers' Party down there, just people in the community that wanted to have a democratic say over how money got spent. And the first year that they did it, only about 1,000 people participated, and they only had a small pot of money. But today, the city of Porto Alegre allocates 20% of its entire budget using participatory budgeting.
That's incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's in other large cities around the country and the world too, Graham, if I'm correct?
Yeah, it's participatory budgeting is used in over 1,500 different communities, mostly by city governments all around the world. In New York City, they just finished their 8th year of participatory budgeting, during which they allocated more than $40 million across all the different boroughs of the city, and over 100,000 people participated in the process along the way.
Wow.
It's pretty incredible, and it's only been there for 8 years. And since it started small in New York City too, and it's just been growing exponentially.
Yeah. So listeners, if you're just tuning in, we are talking about participatory budgeting here on Evidence of Design, whether you're tuning in on the radio at 100.9, online at www.1009wxir.com, or on the TuneIn app. Thank you for being here and listening. We're talking about a democratic process today, and you are directly a part of this participatory budgeting process. You can also contribute to this conversation today. Give us a call, 585-219-8889. Email us, evidenceofdesign101@gmail.com, or tweet us at evidencedesign0. So, Graham, do you mind if you walk us through the timeline for participatory budgeting? I believe it started this year-ish, and you're currently seeking or you're soliciting input for proposals, correct?
Yeah. So things got started back in April when our MAPI held a couple informational sessions, one with partnering organizations, another open to the public, and then from there we gathered representatives of the community for the community leadership team. That process looked more like us recruiting individuals. A lot of PB processes do open applications that anybody can apply, but because we were crunched for time, and also doing this for the first time. We just kind of recruited from folks that had either heard about it before, or that we really wanted represented on the group. So through that process, we were able to recruit about 6 young people, people under the age of 18.
Wow.
Who are, most of them are members of this group called Youth Voice One Vision, which is the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. And I think the youngest member of that group is 12.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool. And they've been awesome to work with. But so we recruited those folks for that process, and then went through another process called writing the rules, where that group made a number of important decisions about how this is going to work, like how old you can be or how much a project can propose for. And then after that, we've gone into this phase that's called idea collection. We started that back in June. And idea collection will run through September. And basically that just looks like us going out into the community, mostly our MAPI staff members going out into the community and talking to folks about how they think this money could be used or should be used. And we do it both informally, just kind of going to where people are. Like yesterday, I went to the House of Mercy during lunchtime and talked to probably 30 homeless folks about how they thought this money should be used. And we also do it formally through, set meeting times where people come and gather and brainstorm together how this money could be used, which I think you two attended. You two attended one of those.
We were there.
Yeah. What did you guys think about that?
I was actually going to say, Graham, that as someone who spends a lot of time critiquing the systems that produce poverty, when confronted with the opportunity to think of ways to fight poverty, I struggled very much to be like, oh no, what do we do? And that is not to say that it's easier to throw stones at the house than it is to build the house. I think there's an element to that, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, there's no magic solution to poverty.
You had some interesting ideas, though.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things I think we could do better as a community, such as transportation. I think that we do a very poor job as a nation, but particularly as a community, of making transportation easy for folks. I think we're too car-centered. We don't have a subway, we used to, and I think our bus system could be enhanced, and all the rest of it. So again, those are broad critiques, but basically, for me at least, I can identify areas where I think that we could do better as a community to help fight poverty: transportation, education, housing. So what I appreciated about those opportunities, though, to sit down with other folks and think through this, is that you talk to people who will have those other perspectives that you need. Because no one person has the solution to fight poverty, right? You need a collective impact way to go about changing the systems that will produce poverty to begin with. And so that's what for your question, what did you think about those meetings? I really appreciated getting to talk to other community members whom I've never met and who come from a variety of backgrounds, but we're all passionate about making Rochester and Monroe County a better place for everyone to live. And that was what's exciting to me.
Yeah. I was struck by, I sort of went in blind, not really knowing too much at all about participatory budgeting. And I was struck by, I had a number of great conversations with people who were similarly concerned about these sorts of issues, but had made real effort to come up with some sort of solution or something to help improve the situation that we have in Rochester. And it was just very very exciting and very uplifting to see such effort and such thought being put into those solutions.
Yeah, it's all that stuff. Very true. It's been really, really cool for me to be able to facilitate that and participate a little bit, but mostly to just watch other people, really go through thinking about how we could spend this money and how we can really fight poverty. It's been very cool to see. I
wonder how often I should break the fourth wall? I never remember if it's a third wall or the fourth wall.
Fourth wall.
I don't want to break whatever wall I'm breaking here, but
Break it anyway.
I've struggled. Go ahead and hammer. I struggle a lot with. It's very easy, I think, to find comfort in your own ideas. And as someone who's trying to host a radio show, I struggle a lot with trying to talk about these things even right now because I have all these ideas and they sound great in my head. But when you actually have to engage in dialogue with other people and you actually do deliberation, so no longer discussion, right? Discussion, again, is just sort of talking. Deliberation comes to a conclusion. It's very hard in deliberations to, I think, find what you're saying worthy of what your initial thoughts were, if that makes any sense. And I guess as another example, it's very easy to talk in general about a lot of the problems going on, but when you're sitting down with youth, when you're sitting down with people who are leading other organizations, the reality becomes a lot more clear in terms of what systemic barriers exist and the complexity of what we do about it. So why I'm really excited about something like participatory budgeting is it forces people to have conversations. It's a lot easier to just be within your own thought bubble or your own, Twitter streams or Facebook streams. But when you actually have to sit down and talk about fighting poverty, you realize the complexity, but you also realize the immense opportunity for collaboration that we don't often partake in on a daily basis.
Yeah. And I think that was like one of the most thrilling aspects of it for me was that there were a lot of people in there with very different ideas on solutions. And so there was like I guess, for lack of a better word, an amount of conflict there, but it was all handled very like democratically, very, very politely, and it felt like actual discussion, which is something that is so difficult to find in today's increasingly polarized society.
Yeah. Most of the, like you were saying just a little bit ago, most of the discussions around things like poverty are usually about what's going wrong. Whether it's whatever perspective people bring to that conversation, it's always about what's going wrong. And having the opportunity through participatory budgeting to flip that conversation around and not talk about what's going wrong, but what can we do about it? It's really, really cool. Really, really cool to see. But I will say that no one is pretending that $175,000 is going to fix poverty.
Great point.
That this process is really more. It's more than just the $175,000. It's about the process itself.
Right.
We do want to make sure that the projects that get funded through this process have a meaningful impact in our communities. But what we really hope to demonstrate, and by we I mean our MAPI, as well as the community leadership team, this was a goal that we both came to, is that this process works, that people in Rochester want it, and that larger institutions, say the city government, the county government, other major funding institutions in the community take up participatory budgeting and they use it in their own work as a best practice for how to allocate funds in the community. Which, now that would be really powerful if 10 years from now participatory budgeting is just a part of the fabric of Rochester.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it brings so many benefits. It builds trust between institutions and the people that they're trying to serve. It builds skills among the people that participate along the way. Like being a budget delegate it takes a lot of work, but you learn so much through it. I've never done it or seen it done. So when it comes time to do that this fall, I'm going to learn a lot as well as the people participating in the process. But it also builds just civic engagement. They did a study on participatory budgeting in New York City, and they found that I can't remember if it was like 1 or 2 years. But anyway, they found that using participatory budgeting increased voter turnout in New York City by 7%.
Wow.
Which is a significant amount. That's not insignificant. So it has so many benefits. Imagine if 7% more people in Rochester voted.
Yeah.
That would be, things might look differently.
I really want to, Graham, that's an awesome point. And this reminds me, like the easiest way, or not even the easiest. So you start to care about something when you feel like you've helped to build it. you give people agency, you give people ownership, you start to care about it. So when we are talking about participatory budgeting, it is a really useful way to get people to care and feel ownership about collectivity in our society and about poverty, because you are then participating in those discussions about how to go about solving or ending or alleviating the mal effects of poverty. And that is so important that I think we could all do a better job at, of making sure that we feel like we have authentic opportunities for agency to actually make differences in our community. And, I think that's a phenomenal point where if people don't vote, they don't feel like, some people who don't vote perhaps don't feel like their vote matters. And I think we just need to somehow articulate a way that's like, no, you are a part of this world, and we need to, thinking of Lord of the Rings there, Pippin and talking to tree ants, the ants there, you're part of this world, aren't you? I think we could do a much better job of that. So I think that's a really strong point.
Yeah, and I'm personally, I'm also excited by the opportunity to build trust, to build relationships between the community and between the government and institutions, because I feel that too often, like you said, Jason, we don't know where our funds are going. But I know that you and I have, if not on this show, in our personal lives, talked a lot about how important, like, having a strong, I don't know how to say this, like infrastructure is good. Like, roads are nice. Healthcare for everyone would be great. And the government can provide that. It has provided that in other parts of the world. And there is a real effort by some politicians to sort of discredit and sort of discourage the idea that government needs to be playing an active role in people's lives. But to a certain extent, I feel it is both necessary and supremely beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
And building that trust would certainly help accomplish that.
Mm-hmm. So listeners, we are talking about participatory budgeting here on 100.9 FM WXIR. You're listening to Evidence of Design. I'm joined by Graham Hughes, who is a representative from RMAPI and is leading or helping to lead the participatory budgeting process in Rochester. We want to hear from you. Graham just mentioned that RMAPI is currently in the idea collection phase, so you can submit proposals in order to help to alleviate or fight poverty in Rochester. We want to hear from you. Give us a call, 585-219-8889. What are some things that you think that we can all do to help fight poverty in Rochester? There's $175,000 out there. You can submit a proposal for a smaller amount of that sum to help fight poverty. What are some things that you think that money should be used for? 585-219-8889, or email us evidenceofdesign101@gmail.com, or tweet us at evidencedesign0. So Graham, you're in the idea collection phase. When does that end, and then what happens after that?
Yeah, so we're in the idea collection phase until September 12th is the deadline that we've set for stopping collecting ideas. After that happens, volunteers known as budget delegates, who we are trying to actively recruit right now. So, and anyone can be a budget delegate. It doesn't matter their age. Mm-hmm. Will take those ideas, or as many of them as they can, because people have limited time and resources, given everything that goes out in life.
Sure.
They'll take as many of those ideas as they can and turn them into real project proposals with, budgets, sites identified, vendors or organizations that money might need to go to, all that kind of good stuff. They'll create these proposals, and then after that, in probably sometime in late November or December, we'll go through a phase of project expos, they call them. It's basically just promoting the projects that are available to vote all throughout the community. Those will take place, formally and informally. A popular way that it's done around the country is to set up a bunch of tables in a gym and make posters for each project, and just line the walls or the tables with these projects, and everybody just walks around and sees what's available.
Like club fairs.
Yeah, exactly, like a club fair. And we'll do that for a couple weeks to a month before the community votes openly in January.
Okay.
And voting will probably be 1 to 2 weeks long. That's a decision that the community leadership team has yet to make. And it'll happen online, in person, all over Rochester. Our goal is to engage 5,000 people throughout the process by the end of this.
Nice.
And voting is the biggest way that will happen, most likely.
Now, do you have a place in mind or a date set up for that sort of fair that you talked about, where you'll be advertising the?
No, not yet.
Okay.
The only reason for that is because I'm still learning what the budget delegate process is going to look like.
Okay.
The proposal development. And we're still collecting ideas. So most of my mental capacity and energy is focused on those two things. But
do you have any? Can you say? Do you have any favorite ideas that have been submitted so far?
I have lots of favorite ideas, but I don't. As a facilitator of this
Right.
process, I don't think that I should say.
Understandable.
Because it's not up to me.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But I can say what people have, some things that people have talked about.
Absolutely.
So I guess it kind of depends on who you talk to and where you talk to them, what kinds of ideas people come up with. So a lot of the outreach that we do and a lot of the idea collection that we do is more informal stuff. So that's going to places like the House of Mercy during lunchtime. That's going to DHS for a couple hours in the morning, and just talking to people where they are about what they think needs to be done. And a lot of the times when we go there, at least when I've done it, folks they don't always give you a whole lot of detail or information, and a lot of the times they really just talk about what they need rather than ideas that they have for how to get that. And a lot of people talk about the need for housing, affordable housing,
Sure.
and the need for good job training programs. Some folks have specific ideas about, we need to subsidize rents for people with low incomes, for example, or we need like technical or like construction job training programs, that kind of stuff. So those are the ideas that we get a lot at informal types of stuff. At more formal types of events, like the ones that you guys attended, we've tended to see more, like smaller organizations come to talk to us. So at the one you guys attended, for example, there were representatives from Flower City Pickers, who they're a small group that do like food reclamation. They go to like the public market and take all the food that would have been thrown away at the end of the day. They gather it all up and then they redistribute it to housing and homeless shelters around the city. So they came and proposed for some, their idea was we just need some money for staff. We don't have any paid staff. Other small organizations have come, are like the City Roots Community Land Trust,
Yeah.
which is basically what a community land trust does is they buy up housing and land under housing, and they rewrite the lease of the land the housing sits on to say any housing that is built or owned on this land must be bought and then resold in permanent affordability. And they have like a formula for how that happens. I don't know the math exactly. But they came and were like, we want to buy a house and some land. And they're also mostly volunteer run, very small organization. There have been some other examples like that. Those are two big ones that come to mind. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned, Graham, again, I think the point I was bringing up earlier where it's easy to identify the problems. I think that we could do a better job as a society of helping to provide housing, right? And then I'm not sure how we go about doing that, but the Community Land Trust is a good example, perhaps, of what we could be doing as a community to help fight housing issues. And the point, though, that you also brought up earlier, Graham, is the process sometimes is as important as the ends. And it's something, it's in the description of the show online on 1009wxir.com, on our show description, I write that, I believe at least that the means are as important as the ends.
Yeah.
There's that old saying where, the ends justify the means. I wholeheartedly disagree with that.
Me too.
In most regards, yeah.
I think it's to go philosophical for a second.
Please
I think
do.
It's Ralph Waldo Emerson. I could be totally wrong about that. I think that's who it is. His quote about ends and means is, the ends pre-exist in the means.
Oh, I like that a lot.
Which I like a lot.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, there's no separating the ends from the process in which they're achieved.
Yeah.
And so perhaps, maybe again, like you said, $175,000 is not going to magically solve poverty, but the process is what's important, and out of that will come a lot more important things.
Yeah.
I use this example all the time that, I'm not the biggest fan of capitalism, but I'm not saying we blow it up because what's going to be in its place or whatever. I'm not interested in engaging that argument, but I've said before that capitalism wasn't invented by a bunch of dudes sitting around a table saying this is how society will be structured, right? It was organically evolved into the political economic system we have today by people participating in various processes that produced ends.
Yep.
So capitalism wasn't the magical end.
And it's also not like the natural state of things.
Exactly. And so the whole point of the show is to critique the political economic system that produces those unequal ends. And you're right, Matt, that the whole point is that the world that we live in does not have to be the way that it is. Nothing has to be the way that it is. And therefore, by having these conversations, we can change the processes that produce the ends. And I think that's an important conversation. It's still very wishy-washy because I get, like, if you're living in poverty and you don't have food or shelter, it's really hard to care about bureaucratic processes. And I get that. And that's why you need community leaders, like the community leadership team, with a diverse group of people who can be guardians of, I think, a democratic process to help meet the immediate and literally life-threatening needs of too many people in our society and community. And I understand there's a tension there between just needing a solution, but also having these larger, perhaps philosophical notions of what we can do about it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's so our MAPI as an initiative is focusing on systems level change. We're playing the long game. We're talking about the kind of broader philosophical, theoretical things like you're talking about, trying to make major changes to systems, which is very important. The only way that poverty is really going to be changed in the long term, and that we're going to stop creating it in the first place. But at the same time, we know we have to balance the immediate needs of people in that. Because there are people that sleep on the street at night,
right.
And that don't have a hot meal every day, or even a full meal every day.
Yeah.
So it's that tension is something that we live in and we recognize.
Mm-hmm. So, Graham, I have maybe one more question for you about the PB process, but listeners, please, reach out. The conversation doesn't need to end with my questions. You can go ahead and ask Graham, representative from RMAPI and who's leading the participatory budgeting process in Rochester. Give us a call, 585-219-8889. This conversation is fundamentally about you and all of us, so please do. But Graham, I guess my last question is, how do people get involved? So they have ideas. What do they do? How can they contribute?
That's a great question. So there's many ways that people can be involved in this process. Until September 12th, you can submit an idea. The best ways to do that are to, attend one of our events if you see them advertised, or you can go online to our Facebook page is probably the best way you could find the link to the idea submission form, or you could just give me a call. My number is 585-242-6460.
You're a brave man.
It's my office number.
Okay.
Not my personal phone number. Sorry. But give me a call there. You can, just any questions you have about participatory budgeting, just to submit an idea, to get more information, any of that good stuff, give me a call again. That's 585-242-6460. So submitting an idea is a great way to get involved. Another great way to get involved would be to become a budget delegate. And the best way to do that would be to attend Budget Delegate Orientation, which is on September 12th at 6 p.m. at the United Way, which is 75 College Avenue in Rochester. Again, that's 6 p.m. at the United Way on September 12th, which I believe is a Wednesday, 75 College Avenue. And at Budget Delegate Orientation, we'll just give a broad overview of the responsibilities of a budget delegate, and probably start to break into like thematic teams or committees, because lots of ideas fall into different thematic areas, and that committee structure is the most commonly used way to facilitate the process of turning ideas into projects. So becoming a budget delegate, another great way to get involved. You could just tell other people about PB. If you've already submitted an idea or already plan to become a budget delegate, spread the word. Help other people get involved. Tell them how to, that they can become a budget delegate, or that they can submit an idea until September 12th. And then down the line, you can vote. That won't happen until January, and we'll have much more information out about how to vote before then, but a little way down the line from right now. But that's another great way to get involved. And if you want to go even further than just voting yourself, you could host a polling site, and invite lots of other people to come and vote at your site. And again, if you have any questions about how to get involved or about participatory budgeting in general, please give me a call, 585-242-6460. I won't be able to answer or return your phone call until Monday morning when I get back to the office, but I will answer it at some point. I promise you that.
That's awesome. And I'm listening to that. If there's any students listening, if you go to public education, if you go to school, if you are a parent of a student who goes to school, if you are an educator, this sounds like a great opportunity to have a authentic, I hate using that term, it's such a buzzword, but an authentic learning opportunity for your students to actually participate, because you said, Graham, that folks who are 11 years or older can participate, right?
Folks who are 11 years or older can vote. Anyone can participate.
That's so incredible.
If you have an 8-year-old child who wants to be a budget delegate, they can do it.
Nice.
We'll bring them along.
So this is a phenomenal educational opportunity, I think, to get folks involved, learn about budgeting, learn about the systems that produce poverty, and work with other folks. So if you're a student, if you're a parent of a student, if you're an educator, I don't know, bring this to your school and see what can be done about that.
Yeah.
So, well, did I miss anything about PB? Shall we jump on any more discussions, or what? I'm trying to think of any big things I missed, Graham, big pieces.
I can't think of anything else right now.
All right. Well, you're going to get a bunch of calls on Monday on your office, or
I really hope so.
Or again, listeners, 585-219-8889. You still have around 15 minutes to ask some questions about participatory budgeting here to Graham. I would like now to do a hard pivot.
Let's do it.
A hard pivot away from this community-based participatory budgeting to some things in the news this week. And there's a connection, though, folks. I will make a connection. So it's not that hard of a pivot. I want to talk about Paul Manafort.
Okay.
Crickets.
That was a hard pivot.
Absolute crickets. No. So for folks who don't know, Paul Manafort was Donald J. Trump's campaign chairman. He was the second chairman after Corey Lewandowski, and then it was Paul Manafort, and then it was Stephen K. Bannon.
Cool name.
So yeah, jokes aside, if you've been paying attention to the news, maybe not, Paul Manafort has been indicted and charged by the special counsel, Robert Mueller. He has been charged, and Paul Manafort there's been a trial about what Paul Manafort has been charged with. The trial has just ended, 12 days of trial, and now the jury is deliberating on the future of Paul Manafort.
They adjourned on Thursday, I believe.
I believe so.
Yeah.
And so there's so much to this case, but if I can boil it down, Paul Manafort has had a long career in politics. He started actually working with the Gerald Ford administration, counting, yes, I believe, delegates. And in fact, he worked with Ronald Reagan, he worked with George Bush Sr., and of course he worked with Donald Trump. But also Paul Manafort has worked with authoritarian leaders around the world, Angola, Congo, Somalia, and the Philippines. And most recently, and perhaps notoriously, he was working with the presidents of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, who was famously ousted from his presidency in 2014 when the Ukrainian Revolution occurred, which has really spearheaded a lot of the U.S.-Russian tensions today. And so Paul Manafort's job in politics has been quite shady. He famously testified, I believe, before Congress in the 90s about what his work was, and he even admitted it was on the fringes of the political scene. And he essentially just supports typically conservative or authoritarian or strongman leaders, and that's his job, is to support their political agendas. And so he does that in a variety of ways, such as using media campaigns, such as setting up meetings, such as just doing whatever he can really to turn public opinion towards those strong men that he represents. And so Paul Manafort was ousted as Donald Trump's campaign advisor in 2016, or campaign manager in 2016, when it came out that he had somehow illicitly moved millions of dollars of funds in Ukraine as a result of his work in Viktor Yanukovych. And as a result of that fallout, Trump essentially kicked him to the curb, and he has been the subject of Robert Mueller's special investigation ever since Robert Mueller was appointed to this position. And he's been charged with 18 accounts of various things, such as filing false income tax returns, failing to file foreign bank account reports, failing to register as a foreign agent, and bank fraud conspiracy. And so, again, the 12-day trial has just ended, and now the jury is deliberating on Paul Manafort's fate. They will meet again on Monday. There was 12 days, 27 witnesses, and 360 exhibits about all of the things that Paul Manafort has done.
Pieces of evidence. This is a guy who has had ties to Russia, I believe, for years, decades even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the background of Viktor Yanukovych, this is absolutely fascinating. So Yanukovych, again, was the president of Ukraine. He was pro-Russian. A big reason why, if folks remember, in 2014, Ukraine went sort of through a mini civil war revolution was because there were elements in Ukraine that were pro-EU, meaning they wanted to join the Eurozone or at least get closer to it. Mm-hmm. Russia, of course, is not a huge fan of that because they want Ukraine closer within its sphere as it was in the Soviet Union. And so Viktor Yanukovych essentially put the kibosh on Ukraine's efforts to become closer to the EU, which set off a lot of protests. There were other things going on, but that's the very brief sort of spiel.
Yeah.
As these protests were going on, of course, Russia invaded and annexed Crimea, which was a part of Ukraine, and Yanukovych was forced from the presidency and he fled to exile in Russia, where I believe he currently resides. And now Petro Poroshenko is the president of Ukraine, and there are still separatists and fighting, to my knowledge, in the eastern part of Ukraine. And so, yeah, absolutely. Paul Manafort has, of course, supported Yanukovych, who was pro-Russian, and in a lot of other back dealings as well.
Now, I don't remember. I do recall that Paul Manafort's ties to Russia were talked about during the time he was serving as Trump's campaign advisor. Mm-hmm. Was there any sort of evidence at that time or suspicion that either Trump or his team had colluded with the Russians at that point? I don't remember.
I think there was. So this whole question about Trump-Russia connection has been going on for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And ever since Trump famously came out and said, I think we should rethink our relationship with Russia and get rid of sanctions and all of that. Yeah, that has been an ongoing sort of narrative. And Paul Manafort contributed to that incensed questioning, right? Yeah. Because it looks bad, at least optically.
And I feel like I remember that being another reason why Trump might have let him go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with bad optics.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which is funny that he would be concerned about something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah. And so why I'm bringing all this up is not to bore anyone with these different facts and figures, but I think this is a phenomenally interesting and important case. So this is the first big indictment coming out of the Mueller investigation that is before a jury in the U.S. And I love the fact that Paul Manafort is charged with filing false income tax returns.
Yeah.
like the most boring thing ever, right? Like fraudulent bank transactions. I mean, who cares, right?
But I actually said something to that effect earlier this week when we were planning for this show. But I think you put it really beautifully when you said these are like the methods by which people undermine the system. And so actually charging something with this sends a message that perhaps it won't be allowed anymore.
Absolutely. Then that is the direct point I want to make. So you can look at this and say, great, Paul Manafort is doing some skeevy money things, you know. And I love the fact that the skeevy money things are what's on trial because it's really simple, you know, and everything I just told you about Viktor Yanukovych and Angola, Somalia, Congo, you can write that off and be like, this is some just one dude, you know, who's had the privilege of working in the shadowy recesses of our global society. But the whole reason why he's able to do that is because of, again, the means that are creating the ends, these financial processes that allow him to embezzle funds, hide funds, and use essentially money as a way to make bad things happen to society. And so I love the fact that with Paul Manafort, you know, his relationship with Russia or Ukraine is not on trial. It's his abuse of the capitalist system which is on trial. Mm. And that is what we need to do a much better job at in society, is bringing abuses to capitalism on trial. And that's what this is all about. And so famously, you know, he spent, I don't know, $15 million on a suit or whatever it was, you know, ridiculous sums of money on suits and rugs. And
it was like $1 million on suits over the course of like 5 years, I believe.
Yeah.
Close to $1 million. It was like 900,000 something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those have to be some really nice suits.
I should hope so.
They were made out of an ostrich, one of them.
Were they
An
really?
ostrich suit.
An ostrich suit.
That's despicable.
Ostriches
Yeah.
are beautiful creatures, and they should not be worn by people.
Let alone Paul Manafort. But again, yeah, so folks, I wanted to bring this up because pay attention to this. It's going to be interesting to see what the result is. If Paul Manafort is convicted on at least a few of those 18 charges, he'll spend life in prison. It'll be interesting to see if Trump tries to pardon him or if Paul Manafort will flip and start to work with the Robert Mueller team to figure out, again, continued collusion between Trump and Russia.
Jason, you're of the opinion that Trump very well might try to pardon Manafort?
I don't know. I don't.
Because I'm a little
yet.
skeptical just because he fired him before. I feel like that sets a precedent for how he might handle this, because he fired him before for like, at least partly for bad optics, as you said, and he might refrain from pardoning him for the very same reason.
I think he might actually
You do?
pardon him. You know, especially if Trump thinks that Manafort is going to flip and start.
That's a good point. Yeah.
You know, test or working with the Mueller investigation. Yeah. Trump has taken every opportunity that he has had to try to undermine that investigation. And if, you know, no matter how bad the optics, if he thinks that Manafort actually knows a lot and could like push that investigation forward, I think he would certainly pardon him.
I just got a message from a listener that it was an ostrich jacket, not a suit. Sorry.
Still despicable.
Who wears an ostrich?
Yeah.
Babies.
Man, that's good. Stick to music. No, I'm just kidding. But folks, so again, why I also think this is important is because the whole question about what's going on with Trump and Russia, and I'm of the opinion that whatever has been going on that's wrong is because of money. And clearly, whatever collusions have been going on between Trump and Russia are perhaps because that Trump wanted to make a lot of money off of it. I think we have a call here. So caller, hang on the line 1 second. Hello, are you on the air? All right, let's try this again. Caller, are you there? Yes, no. Hello. All right, caller, go ahead and give us a call back. How about now? Nope. All right, give us a call back. Sorry about that.
That's
Yeah.
hit the first button, and then hit the second.
I am an expert at button pressing again. Are you there? No, we are. How about now?
Hello.
Hey, there we go. I apologize. I'm an expert at pressing buttons, as we've described on the show before.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you finally figured it out.
Is this Aaron?
It is, yes.
Aaron, my cousin. How are you doing?
Nice.
Brother, but, you know, cousin's close enough. Yeah, I'm just calling because look, this Trump-Russia thing, it's really fun, it's really interesting, it's really exciting. It's sort of like a movie or House of Cards or whatever, because it's got all these spy angles and, possible compromising video evidence and whatever, and trials and dramatic stuff like that. And I'm just wondering whether you guys think this helps or hurts the cause of liberalism and freedom going forward by, because there's a lot of terrible stuff that I think the modern Republican Party. Look at asbestos. They just decided asbestos is cool again. What's with that? Why do we need asbestos in the world? But meanwhile, you have all these people talking about, Trump, Russia, Manafort, the Christopher Steele dossier. And that's not really, it's juicy stuff and it's interesting stuff, but it's not really politics. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anybody can have compromising information about them. Anybody can be sort of seduced by, money or power or whatever. And yeah, I just want to know if this is all really a distraction from like the long-term goals in the end.
Well, Aaron, I appreciate your call. I'm going to have to let you go here without a response because we have 2 minutes left. But thank you for the call, Aaron. And if I can respond, I think that my response is this directly is involved with liberalism because, again, money and power can influence anyone. But if we are to champion liberal values, I think that our values have to be somehow greater than whatever values capitalism is purporting.
Yeah. I would also just add briefly that though it might not be about a specific political issue, this is really a test of our democratic institutions.
Great point.
Yeah. And that's essential. That's very, very, very important for us to watch whether or not these institutions function as they're designed and whether or not they can survive something like this.
It is sensationalized, and there is a lot of focus and time in mainstream media that is spent on this, but it is important, as you said, Graham. It is like a potential undermining of our entire system, and that's why it's worth talking about.
And even if maybe the media is covering it a little bit too much,
right?
And I certainly don't go and read about this every single day, but I keep my eye on it for sure.
Yeah,
because it's taken a long time for this whole investigation to wrap up, and because of how fundamental of a test it is of our democratic institutions, it's very important for people to keep at least one eye on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. The means will justify the ends. Let's see what our democratic institutions can hold up for.
Yeah.
But folks, I really appreciate you joining us and listening to us here at Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR. Thank you, WXIR, as well, for hosting these types of conversations. Really, really do appreciate, and I think it's a privilege to share this time with you listeners. So we are wrapping up an hour. We talked, after a hard pivot to Paul Manafort, we talked about participatory budgeting with Graham Hughes. I'll give him the final word. Besides, listeners, please do register to vote. October 12th is the last day to register to vote for the general election, which is November 6th. If you've changed your address at all and the last time that you voted, you need to refill out your voter registration form. Please refill that out. You can find it at DMV, library, banks, or our the sort of election office downtown. So please
find it online too.
Find it online. That's right. It's really important. Please do register to vote. Don't care who you vote for. Just vote. October 12th. That's the last day to register. November 6th is our election. Matt, thanks a lot for being here.
You're welcome.
Graham, what's the final word on our MAPI? How can folks get involved in participatory budgeting?
Submit an idea, become a budget delegate, vote.
And what's your number again, and where can they be a budget delegate?
September 12th, the United Way, budget delegate orientation, 6 p.m. That's September 12th, 6 p.m., 75 College Avenue. Give me a call at 585-242-64.